Thank you for joining us this evening or this morning, depending on where you are tuning in from. I'm Julia Grimes, the Deputy Director of the Dunhuang Foundation. It is, as always, a tremendous pleasure to be here with you tonight. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for what promises to be a fascinating webinar on the syncretic wall paintings of Mogao Cave 285 at Dunhuang. It's my honor now to introduce the host of this evening's talk and the moderator of our Q&A, Shih-shan Susan Huang, who, along with Eric Huntington, is our collaborator for this lecture series on transnationality and the Silk Roads. Shih-shan Susan Huang is Associate Professor in Rice University's newly founded Department of Transnational Asian Studies. Her book, Picturing the True Form, Taoist Visual Culture in Traditional China, was published in English by Harvard Asia Center in 2012. It has now been translated into Chinese by Dr. Zhu Yiwen, and it will be published in Chinese by Zhejiang University Press, so people watch out for that. She co-edited Visual and Material Cultures in Middle Period China with Patricia Ebry. That was published by Brill in 2017. Her recent articles explore Taoist seals, the efficacy of the Illustrated Diamond Sutra in vernacular Buddhism, and painting and printing connections. Susan is now completing a book, which will be titled Dynamic Spread of Buddhist Print Culture, Mapping Book Roads in China and Its Neighbors. This book will examine printed images and texts as objects on the move, as they were transmitted along networks and book roads in a transnational context. So it now gives me great pleasure to hand the floor over to Susan, who will introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Satomi Hiyama. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you so much, Julia, for the kind introduction. So it's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Satomi Hiyama, Assistant Professor at Kyoto University's Hakubi Center for Advanced Research, which was founded in 2009 to support promising young scholars from around the world. Dr. Hiyama received her PhD in art history in 2014 from the Freie University in Berlin. Her dissertation explores mainly the Kucha wall paintings at the Asian Art Museum, State Museums of Berlin, where she also worked as a research fellow from 2010 to 2016. Dr. Hiyama's current research focuses on the Buddhist art history of the Silk Road, especially the 5th to the 7th century cave temple wall paintings in Kucha and Dunhuang. Dr. Hiyama has written many exciting works. Her new book, published in 2022, is titled Traces of Sarvastivadins in the Buddhist Monasteries of Kucha. It is co-authored with Giuseppe Vignato. Also this year, she co-edited Connecting the Art, Literature, and Religion of South and Central Asia, a fast trip dedicated to Professor Monica Zing, an outstanding art historian in the field of early Buddhist art of South and Central Asia. Dr. Hiyama's scholarship was recently recognized in Japan. Her article on the iconography of Indian astral deities in the wall paintings of Mogao Cave 285, published in 2020 in the major Japanese journal on Buddhist art, Bukkyo Geijutsu, was awarded the prestigious Koka Encouragement Prize in 2021. And this is an award for remarkable research on East Asian art. I was very excited to learn that a Chinese translation of this article has just been published in the latest issue of Dunhuang Yanjiu. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Satomi Hiyama.
Thank you so much, Susan, for your generous introduction. Let me share screen. So I shall start my talk. So thank you so much, dear Julia and Susan, for generously hosting this event. It is an incredibly great honor for me to be able to present my research on the wall painting of Mogao Caves as a webinar series with Rice University's Department of Transnational Asian Studies and the Dunhuang Foundation. Since this webinar series features questions of transnationality, encounters on the Silk Roads, my talk will focus on the wall painting of Mogao Caves in the early 6th century that include the multicultural assembly of divinities and multi-ethnic donor portraits, mirroring the multicultural milieu of the Dunhuang region at that time. So before looking into the detail of the painting, I would like to explain how I approach Dunhuang cultural history as an art historian. In a pre-modern society, producing an art object was a social enterprise which took an enormous cost and labor. It was not like the present days when everyone can try to create one's own artworks by using various tools and mediums. Only those who had a high social rank and great economic power could afford to hire skilled artisans and purchase valuable painting materials to patronage the creation of artworks. Thus, artworks in earlier historic periods can be regarded as a window into history. By observing its material, shape, colors, style, and content of representations, we can learn a rich amount of information about the society, geopolitical situation, as well as cultural and historical setting of the region that cradled the creation of the art object. This is a basic idea of how visual arts can be used as a resource to research history. Today, what I chose as our window into an interesting moment of the history is Mogao Cave 285, one of the most well-known cave temples in Dunhuang through the outstanding aesthetic quality of its decoration, as well as its earliest datable inscription at this site. Maybe some of the audience had a chance to see the full-size replica of this cave in the exhibition held at the Getty Center in Los Angeles in 2016. This cave is one of the Mogao Caves in Dunhuang, which was an important oasis town situated on the western frontier of the Chinese cultural sphere, where it confronted the Indo-Iranian cultural sphere in Central Asia. Located at the strategic position of the Silk Road traffic and trade, Dunhuang played a crucial role in East-West cultural exchanges since the antiquity, and the cave temples in this area, such as Mogao and Yulin, can be regarded as valuable material and visual evidence for the long cultural history of this region. There are several reasons that Mogao Cave 285 has a special place in Dunhuang art history. The main chamber of this cave is around 6 meters wide, 6 meters deep, and 4.5 meters high, which is relatively spacious and enabled a large number of people to assemble in this cave. The cave has a square plan with a truncated pyramidal ceiling with 8 smaller cells. The architectural features with such small cells are normally associated with the Vihara caves with meditation cells as typically seen in the Buddhist rock monasteries in India. However, since these small cells are richly decorated, scholars tend to hold that these cells might have served for a ritualistic purpose instead of practical function as a meditation space. The ritual nature of this cave space is further reinforced by the presence of a square altar in the middle of the floor. Even though the present altar is dated to the 11th to the 12th century, it cannot be ruled out that it might have replaced an altar from the earlier period. The unique characteristic of this cave is that each wall has completely different iconographical content, unlike other Mogao caves with more consistent decor on all the walls. The most obvious difference is the stylistic features of the west wall and all the other walls. Only the west wall is painted in the style which has much in common with the Indo-Iranian style paintings in Kucha and other Central Asian towns located further west along the Silk Road, while the paintings of the other walls show the features of the Chinese paintings. The west wall, fits the viewers entering into this cave would first confront, show the assembly of Indian deities surrounding the statues of the Buddha and two arhats, while the ceiling is occupied by various mythical creatures derived from Chinese traditional immortal cult, such as Fuxi and Nuwa, with meditating monks in mountain caves at the bottom. The south wall has depictions of several Buddhist Avadana stories, mainly the story of 500 robbers. The north and east walls are mainly covered with preaching scenes, with a group of portraits of donors with votive text below. These donors' group portrait on the north wall are a rich repository of information about the historical background behind the production of this cake. Because the votive text document the multi-ethnicity of the donors as suggested by their family names, such as the Han Chinese in Gansu, Sogdians, and the Hephtalites. Furthermore, these texts even mention the donation year of this cave in Da Wei Da Tong years 4 and 5, that is 538 and 39 CE. So namely the West Wei period of Dunhuang. This special format of the year, Da Wei, is a typical feature seen in the color font of the sutras copied by the local governor, Prince of Eastern Shan, Yuanrong, and his daughter. So based on this, we can learn that Yuanrong played a key role in commissioning this monumental cave. Yuanrong was born in Pinchang, the first capital of Northern Wei, in the late 5th century as the fourth generation grandson of the second emperor. He then moved to Luoyang along with the relocation of the capital in 494. Around 525, he was appointed as the governor of Guazhou, which is the old toponym of Dunhuang, and given the title Prince of the Eastern Shan in 529. Following this, he actively engaged in various Buddhist cultural projects, such as a large-scale sutra copying project and patronizing the creation of Buddhist caves. He continued to the governor of Guazhou until his death around 540. In fact, two caves in the Mogao Grottas that show the dynamic syncretism of various religious features in their decorations, namely Mogao Cave 249 and 285, were constructed in the period when Dunhuang was ruled by Yuanrong, who was grown up in the cultural mainstream of the Northern Wei. In the cultural history of China, Northern Wei marks the period when both Taoism and Buddhism prospered at a larger scale than the previous dynasties. During the Northern Wei period, numerous Buddhist and Taoist visual art were created, and large-scale Buddhist cave temples, such as Yungan and Longmen, were commissioned by the imperial house. It was also the period when the Buddhism went through a process of Sinicization. In fact, the Sinicization of Buddhism and Buddhist art already started long before the Northern Wei. So during the Han Dynasty, when Buddhism was freshly introduced from the West, the equation or fusion of the Buddha with Chinese immortal deities was already undertaken, as recorded in both textual and visual sources. Here is, for example, a bronze money tree, which has been a popular burial item in Sichuan province and other parts of Western China. The motif of coins, which characterizes this sort of artifact, symbolizes a wish for a wealthy afterlife in the paradise of the Queen Mother of the West, Shiwamo. So interestingly, the Buddha figure often appears as a part of the decor of the money tree, along with other immortal deities. As a matter of fact, the constant encounter with the art traditions originating from the other religious streams and their syncretistic fusion characterizes Buddhist art history from the beginning. The Ashoka pillar, for example, which is the earliest visual art of Buddhism, were created by borrowing the visual vocabulary of the Achaemenid Empire. The early Buddhist art of India contain rich references of pre-Buddhist indigenous spirit deities such as Yaksha and Yakshinis, which are adopted in Buddhism as a protector of the Dharma. In Gandhara, under the multi-ethnic and multi-religious milieu of the Kushan Empire, both the Hellenistic and the Iranian deities, motifs, and ideas were absorbed into the Buddhist pantheon. Thus, syncretism may be one of the key terms to understand the mechanism of the expansion of Buddhism throughout its history. A special feature which marks the syncretistic Buddhist culture of Northern Wei may be its elaborate hybridity, both at the philosophical and visual levels. During this period, a discourse to paraphrase the Buddhist teachings, traditional Chinese immortality cult, and Taoism by borrowing each other's term had become a popular practice. This cultural stream includes, for example, the making of various apocryphal Buddhist sutras in which the Chinese traditional religious concepts were incorporated, and the fusion of the Buddhist Sumeru cosmology and Chinese Kunlun cosmologies. At the same time, the mutual borrowing and fusion of the visual motifs of Buddhist art and the traditional Chinese mortuary art also took place. An innovative feature of this special form of visual art is that they could deliver different meanings to the viewers according to one's religious affiliation. For this aspect of Northern Wei art tradition, I am much owing to the research of my colleague, Professor Zhang Fan of Kyoto University. So if you are interested in learning more on this topic, I strongly recommend her publication as a great reference. Here is an example from tomb art of Northern Wei, dated to early 5th century, which is studied in detail in this cited article. So the Chinese creator god bear, Wuxi and Yuwa, is depicted with a flaming jewel, which is growing out of a botanical stem. This jewel can be interpreted as both the money jewel for the Buddhists and also as magical linji mushroom for those who have Chinese immortal cult in mind at the same time. The syncretistic form of Buddhist belief can also be observed in the colophon of the sutras written by Yuanrong himself. For example, the colophon of the Humane King Sutra states, "I wish to become a Buddha for rescuing the disciple and obtaining longevity like a Bodhisattva or Ancestor Pan." So Ancestor Pan is a Taoist saint who is known for his extraordinary longevity, while Buddhist Bodhisattva has nothing to do with longevity, of course. So a curious syncretistic fusion of Buddhist and Taoist ideas can be found here. In fact, the wall paintings of Mogao Cave 249, another cave in Dunhuang, which was most likely commissioned by Yuanrong, faithfully mirrors his unique syncretistic thought. This cave, nearly as large as Cave 285, has a simple square plan covered by a truncated pyramidal ceiling. Both the architectural style and the composition of the ceiling painting of this cave are closely associated with Chinese mortuary art tradition. The Dinjiajia tomb, for example, which was excavated in Jiuchuan, a neighboring town of Dunhuang, and is dated to the 5th century, can be taken as a reference. This tomb shares a similar architectural form with Cave 249, with a representation of Kunlun Mountain on the ceiling, the axis mundi of the traditional cosmology of China. Looking closely, we can observe how tact-free the ceiling painting of Cave 249 adopts the spatial and visual syntax of Chinese mortuary art in this Buddhist worship space. While the northern, western, and eastern slopes are filled with Chinese mythical creatures that are either related to the auspicious motif glorifying emperors or to the ascension to heaven, the western slope contains the hybrid image of the Buddhist Sumeru Mountain and the Chinese Kunlun Mountain. The shape of mountain can be associated with both the iconography of Buddhist Sumeru and Chinese Kunlun, while the ocean painted at the bottom part of the mountain cave can either be interpreted as the ocean surrounding Sumeru or the weak river floating around Kunlun. The gate and fortress walls are painted atop the mountain. Interpreting with the Buddhist tradition, this can naturally be understood as Indra's palace in the Triassilimsha heaven, which is placed at the summit of Sumeru, though we have to pay attention to the motif of the half-opened gate at the middle. This does not belong to Buddhist iconography, but to the traditional Chinese iconography of the Gate of Heaven, which is located atop Kunlun Mountain and is thought to be the entrance to the immortal divine world. Another interesting motif is the two snakes coiled in the middle of the mountain. There are naturally two Naga kings, Nanda and Upananda, according to the Buddhist cosmology, which is narrated in various early sutras. But looking closely, these Nagas have 4 legs with long claws. So Indian Nagas are practically snakes and just shouldn't have such 4 legs, but Chinese dragons do have these details. These dragons are the motif closely related to the Kunlun cosmology. Here we can see the fusion of Indian Nagas and Chinese dragons. Lastly, we have these mysterious guardian deities in front of the mountain, who has 4 eyes and 4 arms and grasping the sun and moon. According to Buddhist narrative, he can no one else than Asura who tried to steal the sun and moon from the heaven, even though Asura is usually depicted with 3 faces and 6 arms in Buddhist iconography. On the other hand, according to the context of Chinese immortality cult, this figure can rather be associated with Fanshan Shi, the Chinese legendary exorcist who wears the 4-eyed golden mask. Fanshan Shi serves as an important motif for traditional Chinese tomb art, which can protect the spirit of deceased people from evil gods. The connotation of Chinese mortuary art can be further reinforced by the motif of dragons and phoenix chariot flying toward Sumeru or Kunlun that were depicted on the northern and southern slopes of the ceiling. This pair of motifs had served as the general image of the ascension to heaven in early and medieval China, because it was necessary to ride on the chariot yoked by dragon, phoenix, and other mystical creatures to reach the heavenly realm above the Kunlun Mountain. The ceiling paintings of Mogao Cave 249 follow the syncretistic culture trend of the Northern Wei dynasty, presenting a tactful fusion of the spatial visual syntax of Chinese mortuary art and Buddhist art. Sumeru and Kunlun cosmology overlap in one single painting by adapting a hybrid image method, and its interpretation is open to each viewer with each religious affiliation. This elaborate syncretistic ceiling decoration of Cave 249 has a direct thematic continuity with the ceiling of Cave 285, which is also filled with the images of Chinese mythical creatures. On the slope, the eastern slope of the ceiling, located directly above the cave's entrance, we can find a pair of Chinese creator gods, Fuxi and Yuar, respectively carrying a sun disk with a three-legged bird and a moon disk with a frog in front of their chest, and flying towards the money jewel depicted at the middle of the composition. Fuxi and Nuar belong to the traditional motif decorating the tomb walls and other mortuary art in China. While they are usually represented with human upper bodies with long snake tails, here they have, once again, good. Here they have reptilian lower bodies. This special iconography finds its parallel again in the wall paintings of the Jinjiajia tomb in Jichuan. The widely accepted interpretation of these wall paintings is to associate it with the Sutra of Four Regions of Sumeru, Shumi Shujing, which was proposed by Professor Hu Huizhe in 1980s. The original text of this Buddhist apocryphal text is not extant, yet quotations in several Chinese Buddhist texts from the 6th century onward enable us to reconstruct its content. It counts Fuxi and Nuar, a pair of Chinese creator gods, as two bodhisattvas who were sent to this world by Amitabha Buddha. At the beginning of the world, there was no sun, moon, or stars. Fuxi and Nuar then went to the seventh heaven to bring the 7 treasures to this world to create the sun, the moon, and the 28 nakshatras or lunar mansion, through which light and the 4 seasons were brought to the earth. All these heavenly bodies move towards the west because they all pay homage to Amitabha Buddha, the Lord of the Western Paradise. So this description fits very well with the overall layout of the painting on the ceiling. So the money jewel depicted at the center of eastern and southern slopes can be understood as illustrating the 7 treasures from which Fuxi and Nuar created the heavenly bodies. In addition, most of the mythological creatures and even the lotus flower and cloud floating between them show dynamic movement towards the central Buddha niche on the of the west wall. So which is oriented towards the west. But then, how is this elaborate representation of the Sutra of 4 regions of Sumeru on the ceiling related to the Indian divine pantheon depicted below it? To solve this mystery, we need to consider the geopolitical situation of Dunhuang in the late 530s. Located at the western border of Chinese political realm and also at the strategic point of the Silk Road trade, Dunhuang suffered from political turbulence for an extensive period. The security of Guangzhou area was especially threatened by the revolt that occurred in various areas of the Northern Wei when Yuanrong came to govern the area around 525. In fact, the colophon written by Yuanrong in his hand-copied sutras contained many sentences expressing his strong anxiety and pessimistic mood to the political situation. In 535, however, the political situation of Dunhuang became stable due to the temporary end of the invasion of Rouran and Zhu Yufeng into Western Wei. It was, however, only owing to the subtle diplomatic balance between Dunhuang and its neighboring powers. For the study on the historical background of Dunhuang in 530s, I am greatly benefited from the extensive study by my colleague, Dr. Kei Tabayashi. Furthermore, the 2 war families were portrayed among the donor group depicted on the northern wall of the cave 285 play a key role in understanding the geopolitical setting of Dunhuang in this period. Hua was a translation of Bactrians or Hephthalites in Southern Liang dynasty, while they were called Yeda by the Northern dynasties. So it is a tricky situation that the portrait donors in this cave were called Hua, Hua instead of Yeda, as the latter translation must have been more familiar to Yuanron, the commissioner of this cave, who originated from the northern way. So this phenomenon indicates the connection of the Hephthalite immigrants in the Dunhuang area with the Liang dynasty, and eventually with the Tuyukon, a powerful tribe which ruled over the region between Liang and Dunhuang and mediated the linguistic communication and trade between the Hephthalite and Liang. Then, who are the Hephthalites? So it is actually a very difficult question, as the research on their ethnicity, language, and cultural identity is still ongoing in the field of Central Asian history, especially in numismatics. So here I just describe very general information. So they are Central Asian nomadic group originating from Bactria, who controlled a wide area of Central Asia in the 5th to the 6th century. Until the middle of the 5th century, they coexisted with the Khizarites as one of the local ruling powers of Central Asia. By engaging in conflict and enacting alliance with the Sasanian rulers, they gradually expanded their power. Until around 509 to 57, the Hephthalite's political influence reached to its maximum expansion, including North India, Eastern Iran, and the Tarim Basin. The Hephthalite occupation of the vast area of Central Asia is a remarkable phenomenon in the cultural history of the Silk Road, as it improved and accelerated movement of people, as well as transfer and exchange of goods and ideas between the Indian, Iranian, and Chinese cultural sphere. Professor Yoshida Yutaka, the specialist of Sogdian language, emphasizes the impact of this period in the cultural history of Silk Road and proposed calling it as Pax Ectarica. So some decades ago, scholars used to regard the Hephthalites as the abandoned destroyer of the culture, especially of Buddhism. Archaeological data, however, rather demonstrates that the population increased and new cities were established in Sogdiana under the control of the Hephthalites, preparing the preliminary stage for a great cultural prosperity of Sogdiana in the next centuries. Furthermore, most of the Hephthalite rulers were in fact tolerant of Buddhism and even donated to stupas, even though they were basically the worshipper of the Hindu deities. Being nomadic in nature, the Hephthalites did not develop their own artistic traditions throughout the centuries as other major civilizations. Instead, the artworks that can be associated with the Hephthalite workshops are characterized by an elaborate mixture of Greco-Roman, Sasanian, and Indian motifs. So here too, we see the multicultural fusion of visual art that had been a popular practice in the west of Dunhuang in the early 6th century. Furthermore, the elaborate research by Etsuko Kageyama demonstrated that there are some motifs of visual art that were favored by the Hephthalites and were widely spread in Central and East Asia during the period of the Pax Ectarica, such as the triple crescent crown, which is indeed worn by many figures depicted on the west wall of Mogao Cave 285. So the Hephthalite art tradition surely left its traces here. And a less studied aspect of Mogao Cave 285 as one of the rarely attested legacies of the Pax Ectarica needs to be paid more attention. While there are only few sites and art objects, the production or representation of which can be surely attributed to the Hephthalites, This cave is a rare case that the Hephthalite people themselves are portrayed as the donors, assuring their involvement into the commission of this monumental cave. So another site in northwest China, which left some remarkable traces of the Pax Ectarica, is the Kijil Cave Syncretic, particularly in the so-called first Indo-Iranian style paintings. Especially in Kijil Cave 207, the wall painting of which contain various motifs related to the Hephthalite occupation of Central Asia, we can find several common motifs with Mogao Cave 285, including the same patterned textile, which was used for covering an Arhat throne and for monastic robe, respectively. In my paper, I argued that this seems to be the visual representation of the actual textile to have been circulated along the northern Silk Road in the 5th to the 6th century. So these evidences show the close relationship with the Buddhist art of the Western Wei period in Dunhuang and the first Indo-Iranian style paintings in future. This is just a quick advertisement. If you are further interested in the futures and the chronology of Gudja caves, please take a look on our recent publication just published this year. Okay, now let's come back to our cave. So to establish good relations with the Hua Hephthalite people residing in this region was surely a strategic choice for the local governor of Dunhuang. And since it not only helped to secure a diplomatic relationship with all the Western regions controlled by the Hephthalites, but could also be an aid for maintaining peaceful relationships with other great powers in the East, such as Dunhuang and Lian, both of which had tied with the Hephthalites. Furthermore, the Hephthalite connection seems to have been crucial for economic reasons too. Yuanron's colophon of the Humane King Perfection of Wisdom Sutra referred to a donation of 400 silver coins, which were the currency of the Sasanian Iran and eventually of the Hephthalites. This bears witness to the situation that the commercial ties with the Western countries under the Hephthalite control was indispensable for Yuanron to finance his Buddhist culture's project. So this political dimension reveals the internal logic hidden behind the declaration of Cave 285. The prestige position of the Hephthalite donors in the commission of this cave can be deciphered through the layout of the painting. Among the various iconographic motifs that are painted in this cave, it is the Indian deities, which occupy the most prestigious position, namely right next to the main devotional images on the Western wall. The Hua Hephthalite donors are the most plausible candidates to be associated with the worship of these Indian deities in this particular cave. At the same time, the arrangement of Chinese deities painted in the ceiling, which is located atop of the entire cave space, may honor the Han Chinese people who might have been the majority among the donors of this cave. From now on, let's observe the curious details of the wall paintings of the West Wall. It shows various Hindu deities surrounding the Buddha and Arhat, such as Vishnu, Shiva, Indra, Brahma, Skanda, Ganesha, and so forth, with Indian astral deities depicted at the top of the composition. It is important to mention that even though we can trace the origin of the iconography of each deity in Indian art, the exactly same composition of this painting with the same combination of deities cannot be found anywhere. And interestingly, this painting offers the earliest evidence ever indicating the father and son relationship of Shiva and Ganesha, even earlier than its first textual description in the Skanda Purana in India. So this leads us to wonder how the transmission process of these Indian divine representations was. Were they transmitted from India to Dunhuang through the lost visual materials such as paintings on papers or other fragile media? Or were only the concept of these deities transmitted to this area, and where Central Asian Buddhist painters requested to visualize these new concepts by referencing the iconographical vocabulary available to them. For many reasons, I find the latter more plausible, as we can see in other details in the painting, such as the astral frieze at the topmost section of this composition. The blue background and the floating figure in aureoles indicate that these figures belong to the celestial sphere. Among them, it is clear that the leftmost figure, seen from our side, is the sun god Surya riding on the chariot, while the rightmost figure is the moon god Chandra on the chariot, shows iconographical reference of Indian art. Intriguing figures are found between Surya and Chandra. So there are 16 figures surrounded by white aureoles, 6 seated young male figures with nimbi on the left, and 7 standing old men accompanied by female figure on the right. While their placement secures their identity as a personification of certain astral bodies, they lack any comparable representation or iconographical prototype. The most widely accepted interpretation of these astral figures has been raised by Hiroshiger and Sasaki Ritsuko regarding them as personification of South Dipper and the North Dipper. The South and North Dipper pair is one of the most important constellations in Chinese astral cult, which is believed to be responsible for the life and death of humanity. The South Dipper is in charge of life and longevity and is visualized as a young male deity, while the North Dipper, in charge of death, is shown as an aged male deity, even though the visual evidence of this deity can be found much later date. The biggest problem of this interpretation lies in that there is no iconographic convention to depict the South Dipper as 6 young male figures and North Dipper as 7 old men accompanied by a female figure, both in Taoist and Buddhist art tradition. Furthermore, if they are prominent Chinese astral deities, their relationship with Indian deities below them is difficult to explain. To solve this problem, let's observe the representation in detail. The astral figures depicted next to the moon god are all aged men with their hair tied atop of the head and only wearing dhoti or short pants. So this is a typical iconography of Brahmi in Buddhist art. A curious feature is that all these figures have different dynamic gestures, and also that a noble lady in Chinese dress is inserted between the 4th and 5th Brahmi. Only she has no aureoles, but has a nimbus. In fact, Buddhist iconography of Brahmins has some variation. So taking Buddhist art in Gandhara and Kuja as a reference, the different life stage of the Brahmins are precisely distinguished in the iconography. Among them, the future of our Brahmin figure correspond apparently to either the forest dweller or renunciate stage of the Brahmin, meaning that they are someone who are wise and in the state of hermitage. So in my recent paper, which Susan kindly introduced, I asked that the contemporaneous astral lore in India, as recorded in the Brihat Samhita by Bala Hamihira, can explain all these details. The chapter of Course of the 7 Sages of the Brihat Samhita describes the circular movement of the Saptarishi or the 7 Sages, the Indian personification of the North Dipper, as if they are dancing under the instruction of pole star. This can provide a satisfactory explanation to the depiction of 7 Brahmins, showing various dynamic postures. The lady standing between the 4th and 5th Brahmins is in a pose of devotion of the Brahmin in front of her, can be interpreted as a virtuous lady Arundhati, the personification of alcohol, a faint star belonging to the nose dipper, who is the devout wife of Vasishta, the greatest among the seven sages. Her lack of aureole illustrates the weaker luminosity of alcohol in comparison to other seven stars. Here again, we observe the earliest visual representation of the Saptarishi and the Arundhati, much earlier than the extant representation in Indian art dated to the Pala period. In this representation, I can very well imagine that only the notion of these astral deities was transmitted to Dunhuang painters, who made an effort to depict it by visual vocabulary familiar to them. One detail which may reinforce this hypothesis is the representation of Arundhati in Chinese dress. This is very likely a reflection of the local attire, as it was a fashion trend among Central Asian folks at that time that the men wore Central Asian kaftan, while the noble women dressed themselves in Chinese garments. So this situation can also be observed in the portrait of four Hephthalite donors in this cave. So it is hardly imaginable that this such a prototype of such a representation was created in India. So here we observe the localized visual representation of an Indian astral notion. It would be nice if we can find the reference on the 6 figures next to the sun god in the same source, but unfortunately, the Brihat Samhita does not offer a description matching to these figures. So they are 6 young men with a hairband, each the same in appearance, and each have a nimbus and aureole. This means that they may personify the astral bodies, which have stronger luminosity than the nose dipper. They are calmly seated, in contrast with the dynamic gesture of the 7 sages. As a solution for elucidating both these 6 astral figures and also the composition of the main section of the wall painting of the Western wall, I suggest to take the Surya Galva Parivarta and Chandra Galva Parivarta, the 2 of the 60 chapters of an extant Chinese recension of the Mahasamnipata Sutra as a reference. Both texts were translated into Chinese in the late 6th century by Narendra Yashas, who was born in Udayana under the Hephthalite occupation. So here we again encounter the historical connection with the Hephthalites. Both sections have a strong connection to Central Asia, such as Central Asian toponyms mentioned in the text. As Sanskrit manuscripts of the both texts dated to the 5th to the 6th century were unearthed in China, these texts were surely circulated among Central Asian Buddhists in northwest China at that time. The chapter of nakshatras of the Surya Galva Parivarta refers to a star cluster which can be associated with our 6 male astral figures, which is a critical one Maosu, the Pleiades. When the sage Kaloshti asked the heavenly beings whether they agreed to place Kritika as the first among all the nakshatras, they answered, "We went through the lunar mansions and knew that Kritika is a nephew of the most exalted Mahatejas. So they have 6 suns who move in the sky. This is a reason why Kritika can be placed as the first among them." So in another section of the same chapter, a similar conversation between the sage and the heavenly being is repeated, where the sun god Surya explains the superior role of Kritika among the lunar mansion, which steadily move through the sky over the 4 continents, and always does good deed and bring benefit to us. So these passages provide a good reason for Kritika to be placed right next to Surya in our painting. So because Kritika or Pleiades is a star cluster with a strong luminosity, the visual emphasis of its brightness in the painting can also be reasonably explained. The same Surya Garbha Parivarta also describes the spectacle, which possibly explains the whole composition of the West Wall. The chapter of the Buddha's miraculous performance begins with a scene in which bodhisattvas worship and made donation to Shakyamuni Buddha. The bodhisattvas then appeared in various forms, such as Pratyeka Buddha, Arhat, Brahma, Indra, and four heavenly kings, Vishnu, Mahashivara, or Shiva, astral deities, Asura, Chakravartin, and so forth, and appeared in temples in various locations. Since only those appearing as arhats became subject of worship by sentient beings, the other bodhisattvas transformed themselves into the appearance of arhat too. The sentient beings then found the one emitting the greatest radiance, Shakyamuni, and they became delighted with full satisfaction. So this chapter enables an interpretation of the large Buddha statue set in the middle of the west wall, surrounded by a multi-layered nimbus and mandala, as Shakyamuni showing his great radiance, while two statues of monks wearing the patchwork robes and seated in meditation can be understood as the arhats into which bodhisattvas transformed themselves. Various deities surrounding them, including the six-armed Shiva, Vishnu, Indra, Brahma, and the four heavenly kings, as well as astral deities, can also be interpreted as temporary forms of the bodhisattvas. Okay, at this point, the common ideological framework of the decor of the West Wall and the ceiling is revealed. Both visualize the Buddhist texts, which incorporate deities of other religious streams into the Buddhist pantheon, and show a syncretistic scenery in which various deities of non-Buddhist origin can coexist with Buddhist figures without conflict. As the final section of my talk, I would like to briefly feature the unique image painted in the section linking these Chinese and Indian divine pantheons, namely the images of meditating figures in the mountain caves. These meditating figures are 35 in sum. Among them, 33 are monks, while one is a heavenly being, and another one is a Chinese nobleman seated on the corded chair. The image of meditation in a mountain cave has an established tradition, both in Buddhism and Taoism. In Buddhism, it is a traditional practice of monastics, as Shakyamuni is also said to have practiced it. And in Central Asia and East Asian Buddhism in 5th to 6th century, this practice was especially associated with the rebirth into the Tushita heaven, where one will meet Maitreya. On the other hand, Taoism also developed the traditional concept of the earth immortals practicing in greater heavens. So as it was widely believed that the Buddhist monks can attain a miraculous power through the practice of meditation, it can be easily imagined that arhats with supernatural powers and the Taoist immortals were overlapped in the visual representation. Sharing the common conceptual framework of the practice in mountain caves and the rebirth into the heaven, these figures might have served as a hybrid image, respectively symbolizing the rebirth into the Buddhist Tushita heaven and the rebirth into the Chinese realm of the immortals. Considering this possibility, to find the meditating Chinese nobleman directly above the seventh preaching scene of the North Wall is significant enough, and some scholars associate this preaching scene and the donor figures below to Yuan as a relative. So I wonder if this meditating nobleman is intended to be Yuan himself, who, as a commissioner of this monumental cave and also the generous patron of various Buddhist projects during his reign in Dunhuang, is promised to be reborn into the heaven where both Buddhist and Chinese deities celebrate and protect the soul of this good man together. So now let me summarize the curious cultural landscape of Dunhuang, which we observed by taking Mogao Cave 285 as a window. The syncretistic visual world of Mogao Cave 285 was a product of the special historical setting of Dunhuang and the Yuan-Rong's rule in the late 530s, in which the syncretistic cultural traditions of the Northern Way and the Hephthalite are merged into one visual system. The creation of this cave was likely intended as a sort of cultural project in which multi-ethnic people residing in the area were involved as donors in order to create a collective worship space to be shared by people with different religious affiliations. A visual strategy of the hybrid images enabled to deliver different meanings according to each viewer's religious affiliation, so people worshipping different gods can come peacefully together in this cave without disturbing or disgracing the religious belief of the others. The syncretistic Buddhist art in the 6th century Dunhuang, which do not exclude other religious elements, but dynamically involve them into the visual system, mirror the peaceful period and cosmopolitan nature found in this multi-ethnic and multicultural town. So thank you very much for your kind patience on my long talk. What I have presented today are, thank you. What I have presented today are mostly published in these 3 papers of mine, and even a Chinese translation is available. So if anyone is interested in further detail, please check them. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Satomi. This is so inspiring. And, you know, I think that a lot of our audience have heard about or seen some featured images of Mogao Cave 285. But, you know, now they know why your article got the award.
Really?
Thank you. Inspiring. And, you know, I also saw that there are some Rice students who are taking my classes are here. And I'm very glad that today they have learned a lot of new things. So, all right, we will open to the floor, and the way that we conduct this session would be inviting all the audience to type your questions in the Q&A sessions, and we will answer the question one by one. Well, Vivian Lim asks, can we get links to the articles? The article, you mean there is a Chinese link. I'm going to send you later if you send me the email, because now I'm too busy. All right. But Satomi, is the Japanese article available online, or?
I'm afraid they are not online. Yeah, there's also an English version published in volume edited by Bill Mack and Eric Huntington from Brielle. Yeah, so it is actually, yeah, so it is available online, but not for free. I'm very sorry for that.
Okay. So there is a English version which is included in an edited volume co-edited by my Rice colleague Eric Huntington. And the title of the book is called?
Let me see. Overlapping cosmologies in Asia.
Okay. Overlapping cosmologies in Asia. It's Brielle published this in 2022.
This year, yeah.
Right. Okay, that's great. That's great. All right, so let's move on to Jenny Baker's question. Thank you very much for such an articulate and scholarly explanation. All right, so that's
thank you.
You know, Alice Simking also want to congratulate you about this presentation. Do we have any question? Let me ask a question and, you know, give Satomi some opportunity to explore. I thought that you know, there is a lot of area in this cave that you see the very prominent blue pigment. Is the presence of this blue pigment also related to the so-called Pax Hephthalite, that, you know, this diplomacy link that you mentioned? Can you elaborate a little bit of this part?
Yeah, thank you very much for an inspiring question. Actually, I also wanted to involve this aspect of the cave into my presentation, but the time was not enough. So, yeah, yes, this blue pigment is it is analyzed to be lapis lazuli, and this lapis lazuli pigment was spread along the Silk Road side from 5th century onward suddenly. So, well, lapis lazuli was also available in ancient time in so Near East, and also some so small pieces of lapis lazuli or other pigment were also found from Han Dynasty period and so on. But suddenly a large amount of lapis lazuli start to be supplied from 5th century onward, and I'm wondering if this phenomena is also related with the Pax Hectatica, because the Hephthalite is exactly originating from the region, so Batakshan, which is a production site of the lapis lazuli. But because my research on this lapis lazuli history is still ongoing, I cannot say like a final word on that. Yeah.
Right. All right. So related to this, I'm sorry. Alice Simpkins actually had a question. She
Yeah.
said, "You describe the types of paint used in the wall paintings. So beautiful."
Oh, thank you. Yes, so I mainly studied this the painting style on the west wall, and also this meditating figure at the bottom of the ceiling. And I think this style is very much so they have very much in common with the so-called Indo-Iranian style paintings in the Kutcha caves, especially the so-called first Indo-Iranian style painting, which is dated around the like 5th century to the early half of the 6th century. And as I showed, there are also many common motifs, the small motif like winged crown, triple crescent crown, and the textile pattern, which are very much common between this the west wall of this cave and the first style painting in Kuchar. I don't know if someone elaborated this stylistic research on West Wall further. So I couldn't find so far, and I also have to study by myself more. And as for the Chinese style painting in this world, there are many wonderful articles written in Chinese. And my colleague of Peking University argued that interestingly, the painting style seems to be rather related with the tradition of Liang dynasty. So I mean southern dynasty rather than northern dynasty in part. Yeah.
Okay.
It's very complicated.
Right. And also you today in your talk you mainly focus on Mogao Cave 285, although you talk about 249, and
Yes.
you speculate that they are actually closely related. And at one point you suggest that maybe Cave 249 could also be sponsored by Yuan Rong. Can you say more about this? Or
Yes, thank you.
relationship?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, I think, and also most of the scholars are agree in the idea that this pair of caves, so not really pair, but these two caves, so 249 and 285, are both commissioned by Yuan Ron or his relative, because they have a so strong connection in the content, especially the synchronicity, and also the stylistic feature are very much in common. And so there is an important stone inscription about the making of so Buddhist caves at Dunhuang, which is dated to the Tang Dynasty period, which was excavated at site in Dunhuang. And this inscription mentioned to the great monumental caves carved by or commissioned by Yuan Rong. And many scholars think that these specific monumental caves that associated with Yuan Rong's commission are to be identified as these two caves.
I see.
But unfortunately in 249 there is no votive inscription, so there is no written source exactly confirming the commission of him within this cave.
Great. We have a question from Vladi Konatonu,
Yeah.
talking about the Persian influence. Are there paintings in any of the caves depicting Persian travelers? Is there any Persian presence in any of these caves?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's an inspiring question. So it also depends on how to define Persian. So we surely have lots of Sogdian figures. Yeah, but actually Sogdian figures as a merchant with this triangular hat. So the Sogdian merchant became our established icon for the merchant at some point in the Silk Road art, I think up to around from the 6th century onward. So if we have plenty of this kind of representation merchant, but if they are specifically intended as the Central Asian Sogdian merchant or merchant in general, need to be paid attention. And for Persian, yeah, in general, sorry, I cannot answer right.
There's no direct, evidence to show that, but Sogdian merchants actually have more evidence to make the connection.
Well, there are surely Sogdian connection with Dunhuang Cave. So there was a Sogdian colony in Dunhuang area from very early period, and also our cave 285 has include one family name of Sogdian wife, so who appeared as a wife of the Hephthalite. Oh no, not Hephthalite. Sorry, no, as Han Chinese in the Baltic text of the North War. But and actually there are some studies studying the possible Sogdian influence on the iconography of Shiva and these Indian deities. Yeah, but yeah, it's still ongoing subject.
Great. We have a question from Anne Fong. She said, amazing talk. Can't wait to read the papers and new book. Angela Howard argued that in Kizio Cave 118, the landscape is a magical one that is created by the meditating figures. Her question is this similar to the meditating monks in Mogao Cave 285? Do they play a role in connecting the ceiling and the west walls? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, for your kind words. Yes, I can very much imagine. So meditation was very. So meditation was a very important practice in Central Asian Buddhism, and there was also the manuscript of yoga practice manual excavated from Kizio caves with a lot of visualization practice described in it. So it's very possible that meditating imagery played also role in the iconography of the ceiling of 285. Also in the specific context of our cave, there is also a apparent presence of the Chinese mortuary, so deities. Yeah, so it's a bit more complicated than Kizio caves.
Right, but I feel the way that you present the different sessions of the paintings and how they are related to one another make it really, I had the same speculation as Anne about these band, just at the border of the ceiling and the wall. They kind of serve as a boundary or a kind of mediation.
Right.
Different
That's
realms.
interesting. Yeah, right.
All right, let's move on to the next question. This is from Ella. She's a Rice student, history major. Thank you for your talk. I've only ever read about the Mogao grottos as a place of Buddhist worship. Do you think this view might be revised in light of the possibility you raise of people of other religions sharing worship in these caves?
Oh, thank you for the question. I think basically your insight is right. It is a Buddhist worship site, but in the context of our cave, I think there is a very tactful the visual device inviting people of other religious affiliation to worship together, and but it's not really in the imposing way that only Buddhism is the right religion. So other religious streams are also respected in this visual space. But for like situation of Turfan, so another oasis town in the Tallinn Basin, it is different. So there was a time that whole the region was converted to Manichaeism. So at that time, the caves belonging to Manichaeist belief was carved, and then later also converted again to Buddhism. Yeah.
All right. Great, thank you. Let's move on to Tara's question. Could you talk about any of the dancers, Esaras, or whirling dancers of Sodiana in the depictions?
Oh yeah. Thank you. Yes, actually interesting question because yes, there are many depiction of so-called Sogdian dancers, or not really the dancing bodhisattva in a way Sogdian are dancing in the wall paintings of the Tang period. But in this period, I mean the Northern Dynasty caves, they are not really this feeling, so the depiction of feeling dancers of Sogdiana. It's actually intriguing why they suddenly appear from the Tang Dynasty period wall painting.
I see. Okay, so not so obvious in this early stage. So
yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right. A follow-up question. Can you tell us what cave number that may have the depictions of sodium?
I need to check. I cannot give you all the numbers, but there are a lot. Maybe better to check the paper by Ron Xinzhen and other specialists.
I see that there is no chat function, so I cannot really send any link, a book.
Right.
But it's okay. Do we have other questions from the audience or a comment before I turn the floor to Julia, who would like to make some final announcements?
Maybe can I ask you a question only for my own sake to Susan?
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I wanted to use this opportunity. But I read your book on this picturing the truth, and I really enjoyed it. It's a great book, and you have a whole chapter on the astral representation, like the North Deeper. And how would you think about these North and South Deepers as represented in this cave? Because they are so special iconography.
Yeah. Well, I learned from your talk and your article that the previous scholarship actually suggests that they may represent the Chinese Northern Deeper, but compared to all the deeper images that I can find, I don't see that obvious connection.
Good.
Right. So I find that your interpretation connect them to the Central Asia and Indian tradition very convincing, because they don't look like the Chinese deeper. Yeah.
Okay.
And the Chinese deeper appear as a group of 7 or 9 figures. And the examples that we have are all at either during or after Southern Song. So it's much later than this period. And in ancient Chinese art, deeper appear as constellation. You know that the dot lined in the shape of a scoop. So that's a different form of representation. But none of these are closely resemble your image in 285.
Okay, wonderful. Good to learn, because I'm really not. Yeah, thank you. I'm really not a specialist of these deeper representations in China, so I'm very glad to hear.
your study of this cave complicate our understanding of Dunhuang, and I think that there's no. I think the conclusion is that there's no single reference to these images, and we need to look around and think about different possible sources. And
yeah, right.
Yeah, but even just to think about who might participate in the image making. Maybe there are not only the Chinese painters or the local people, but some traveling artists who might facilitate the
Actually, yeah, I can very much imagine that so some artisans, some painters from Kucha region might have been invited to join the production of the wall painting of the West Wall, because there are so many common motifs that were so specific in detail. Yeah, and so at that time, Kucha was one of the major production site of Buddhist wall painting in all this Central Asian region. That's why it's possible that, okay, let's invite someone so skillful from the major production site. Yeah.
Right. Oh, we have a question from Tongmong. Hi,
Okay.
Hiyama. Hiyama Sensei, thank you for the wonderful lecture. I wonder how you think the function of K285, given the fact that it has attached meditation cells on both sides. Scholars speculate that the cave was used by monks for mental concentration, but there are also scholars who disagree with this argument, such as Mabe Nobuyoshi, who suggests the cells were more of a ritual nature, and she would like to know what you think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Menton, and also for joining my talk. Yes, it's a very, very important question, and I do not really have a definitive answer. So just the idea is maybe something between the practical function as a meditation place and ritualistic purpose. Because if so according to my understanding, so the meditation played an important role in the iconographical program of this cave. So especially thinking, so possibly Yuan himself, the commissioner of this cave, is portrayed as a meditating in mountain cave at the bottom of the ceiling. So maybe like now, so in the present site, there is a big altar in the middle of the floor. And if there is an altar, it is very, likely that it served for ritualistic purpose. So maybe there was some kind of ritual, and these small cells were maybe used for like donors, for example. So they maybe fit in the cells, and they like meditate like in fashion. So not really meditating as a professional monks, but they fit in there and praying for the good rebirth into the heaven or whatever religion you like. So it's like my fancy idea, but I cannot demonstrate this.
I see. Okay, great. Yeah. Do we have other questions from the audience? We got to have more questions from the audience. But Satomi, before other people chipped in, I have a follow-up question about the Hephthalite people. This is fascinating about the possible traces of these Central Asian people in Dunhuang side. Do you see other evidence of their involvement in other Buddhist cave in Northwest China? I know that you also look at, when you study the pigment, the lapis lazuli, you also look at Yulin caves, for example. Yeah. So is this a single case that you can argue for the presence of the Hephthalite people in this region? Or do you other?
Yeah, thank you for inspiring question. So as for Dunhuang, so this family name Huang so which is
Wow.
identified as a hephthalite. So this appears only in this cave. So once in this cave and nowhere else in other caves, unfortunately. And also in other caves in Gansu, I didn't find any so this huar or the yedar, so the hephthalite donors portrayed in the caves. But what I pay attention is the Kucha caves because so based on the historical sources, we know that Kucha was integrated under the Hephthalite control for about half century in the early 6th century. And there are many traces or many specific motifs which can be so associated with the Hephthalite occupation of Kucha. So I'm paying more attention on this Hephthalite period of Kucha. And there's also another site in Uzbekistan, Balalik Tepe.
Oh,
So this with a beautiful painting, and some scholars think that maybe this is a site belonging to Hephthalite, and this banquet scene, the fabulous banquet scene, depicts the banquet scene of the Hephthalite people. Yeah. But there is not really like inscription or other written source demonstrating that. So it's really difficult, and that's why it's so special case in our cave that the Hephthalite people appear with their own name there.
Well, I really think that it's very potential to study all these caves as a whole and then start to tease out their possible connections based on the visual evidence.
Yeah, because they occupied a wide area of Central Asia in the early 6th century. And possibly we can find some traces of this period, so Pax Hephtalica, individual art dated to this specific time frame. Yeah.
Right. All right. We have a final question from Vivian Lam. She wants to know what led you to study the Mogao. She had the opportunity to visit the site in 2015 and learn a lot today.
Oh, thank you, Vivian. Good that you. Yeah, good that you visited the site and hope you enjoyed it. I also visited Mogao Cave 5 times, but it's not enough at all. And actually, so honestly, what led me to study the Mogao Caves is the relationship with Kucha, because I was fascinated by the wall paintings of Kucha, which show a very unique fusion of Indian and Iranian stylistic future. So I was so fascinated since childhood, and I wanted to study definitely these Kucha caves when I was bachelor student until now. And in the course of my research on the Kucha paintings, I noticed that there are some related motifs between my favorite Indo-Iranian style paintings in Kucha and this Mogao Cave 285. And then I started to look at the painting of Dunhuang of this Western Way period as well. And then somehow at that time I had some communication with my colleagues working on the Buddhist astrology. And that's why I knew a little bit about astrological text. And then I looked at this North Steeper figure and I thought, maybe is it the one described in the Brihat Science? And then I started studying this cave.
Great. Yeah, right. This is very inspiring. Thank you again, Satomi. We have learned so much. So
thank you so much.
Let's invite Julia back. She had a few words to announce. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for your great host.
Well, first of all, Satomi, thank you so much for your presentation today and for illuminating all of this incredible research on the multicultural historical background of Cave 285. I've visited and studied that cave for years, and you gave the most convincing explanation I've ever heard for the iconography in the cave. Really, that was brilliant.
Thank you very much for your generous word.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And Susan, special appreciation to you and to Eric Huntington at Rice University for helping us to organize this series and for inviting Satomi. So heartfelt thanks to you both. And to our viewers, Thank you for joining us tonight. As always, we greatly appreciate you and your support. I'd like to announce that our webinar series will continue next year on February 9th with a presentation by Angela Schottenhammer. Angela Schottenhammer is the professor of the Chinese Middle Period and Early Modern World History at KU Leuven in Belgium. She's also director of the International Crossroads Research Center for studies on the history of exchange relations in the East Asian world. So again, her talk will be on Thursday, February 9th. We look forward to seeing you then. Now, from all of us at Kyoto University, Rice University, and the Dunhuang Foundation, I want to wish you all a very happy holiday season and a joyous beginning to 2023. Until we next meet next year, thank you and good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good night
Thank you,
and good
Satomi.
day.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Susan, Julia. Goodbye.